and gyrating, and all these little girls, oh, and we've never seen anything like that.
Imagine turning on the radio today and hearing the voice of someone you thought was long gone. A country star who shaped the sound of an entire generation, but somehow slipped from the spotlight. What if I told you that many of those legends are still alive, carrying untold stories, battles with fame, shocking tragedies, and incredible comebacks? Some of them lived through the wildest chapters of country music, brushed shoulders with icons like Elvis Presley and Hank Williams, or fought bitter battles behind the scenes, yet they survived it all. These aren't just dusty names in history books. These are living, breathing survivors of one of music's toughest industries. And as we count them down, you'll see just how unpredictable and inspiring their journeys truly are. Let's start with one man whose sound came roaring straight out of California, shaking Nashville to its core. The voice of Bakersfield, Red Simpson. When people talk about country music in the 1960s, Nashville usually dominates the conversation. But there was another movement brewing out west in California, in a small town called Bakersfield. And at the heart of that movement was a man named Red Simpson. He wasn't flashy, and he wasn't polished like the stars coming out of Music Row. Instead, he sang about the open road, long hauls, diesel engines, and the lives of truckers. While Nashville pushed rhinestones and heartbreak ballads, Red carved out his own niche. He became the voice of America's highways. His songs like Roll, Truck, Roll, and Highway Patrol tapped into the blue-collar spirit of the era, and before long, truck-driving country had its own loyal following. Red worked closely with Buck Owens and Merle Haggard, but many fans argue he never got the credit he deserved. Nashville elites often brushed him off as too regional, too niche, but Red's influence went far deeper than his chart positions suggested. Trucking songs would later inspire outlaw country and even bleed into southern rock, all thanks to the groundwork he laid. But his story isn't just about music. Red's career had its ups and downs, and rumors swirled about missed opportunities. Industry insiders claimed that record labels simply didn't know how to market a guy who wore his working-class image so proudly. While others polished their image to fit TV appearances, Red doubled down on authenticity. And it cost him. By the 80s and 90s, he was far from the charts, but fans still found him in dusty bars and local festivals, singing about the roads that built America. What makes his survival so fascinating is that while Nashville forgot him, the trucking community never did. Long after the hits faded, truck stops and CB radios kept his music alive. In a way, Red Simpson outlasted the industry itself. He proved that country music didn't belong to a polished elite. It belonged to the people, the drivers, the workers, the dreamers on the road. And that outsider spirit is exactly why fans still whisper his name today. But Red wasn't the only one to defy Nashville's mold. Around the same era, a woman with a completely different approach was climbing the charts. With yodels, confidence, and boldness no one expected. The yodeling trailblazer, Margot Smith. Country music has always had its share of heartbreak queens and southern belles, but very few dared to stand out with something completely different. Enter Margot Smith, a schoolteacher turned country star who stormed into the spotlight in the late 1970s. Her secret weapon? A playful, daring yodel that no one else in the industry could match. Songs like Don't Break the Heart That Loves You and There I Said. It showed her smooth, heartfelt vocals. But when she launched into her signature yodel, audiences went wild. She wasn't just another ballad singer. She was a performer who could make the Opry crowd sit up straight in their seats. For a time, she was everywhere, topping charts and proving that women in country didn't have to fit one mold. But here's where her story gets even more interesting. Unlike many stars who clung to fame at all costs, Margot wasn't afraid to step away when the industry shifted. Rumors say she grew tired of the pressures of Nashville, of having to conform to an image that didn't match who she really was. By the 80s, she began focusing more on her personal life, even returning to teaching for a time. Later, she shocked fans by reinventing herself as a gospel singer and even a children's music teacher. For many artists, stepping away means disappearing forever. But not for Margot. Her ability to switch gears and embrace different stages of life made her one of country's quiet survivors. Even today, she's remembered as one of the few women brave enough to put yodeling on the map, and to do it with pride. Her career is a reminder that sometimes survival isn't about fighting the industry tooth and nail. It's about knowing when to walk away and finding joy in new chapters. And while Margot was reinventing herself, another name from a very different era was struggling to simply be remembered at all. The Forgotten Storytellers, Frankie Miller. Not every country legend got their flowers while they were still on stage. Some were pushed to the sidelines, remembered only by the most dedicated fans. One of those was Frankie Miller, a man who sang with a raw honesty that came straight from the working class. His music wasn't about glamour or rhinestones. It was about the lives of everyday Americans trying to make it through another day. Songs like Blackland Farmer captured that grit perfectly. He sang about farming struggle and pride in hard labor. But while fans connected deeply with those themes, the Nashville industry didn't. Miller's sound was seen as too plain, too rural compared to the polished productions that were taking over. He didn't fit the commercial mold, and as a result, his career never soared to the heights it could have. Yet what makes Frankie unforgettable is that authenticity. He lived what he sang. For fans, that made him more real than many of the chart toppers. Even though he wasn't a household name, he left behind a body of work that influenced younger artists looking to reconnect with their roots. The tragedy of his career is also part of his story. Imagine pouring your life into music, only to be overlooked because you didn't fit an industry mold. That pain resonates with fans who've always felt country should be about the people, not the politics. And in today's world, where fans crave authenticity, Frankie Miller's songs sound more relevant than ever. He was one of the storytellers Nashville tried to forget, but country fans never did. And while Frankie was struggling to be heard, another artist took a different path, reinventing himself completely just to survive the changing tides of music. Masters of Reinvention, Ronnie Dove. If there's one thing the music business doesn't forgive, it's standing still. Audiences move on, styles change, and if you don't adapt, you're left behind. But Ronnie Dove wasn't about to fade quietly. In the early 1960s, Ronnie was making waves. Not in country, but in pop. His smooth voice and clean-cut image made him a hit with love ballads. Songs like Right or Wrong turned him into a teen idol, and for a while, he was one of the brightest stars on the scene. But when the British invasion hit and tastes shifted overnight, Ronnie's world flipped upside down. Rather than giving up, he made a bold pivot. By the 1970s, he was leaning into country, reshaping himself for a new audience. The move wasn't without risks. Pop stars who tried to go country were often mocked as sellouts. Rumors even spread that industry insiders doubted his authenticity, whispering that he was just chasing relevance. But Ronnie proved them wrong by landing genuine country hits and earning a place on the charts. His story is one of survival through reinvention. He didn't cling desperately to the past or stubbornly refuse to change. Instead, he adapted, even if it meant criticism. That decision gave him longevity in a business that chews up and spits out talent overnight. Ronnie's journey reminds us of a truth about country legends. Sometimes the key to survival isn't staying the same, it's daring to become something new. And while he reinvented himself, women in the same era had a very different battle. They weren't reinventing for survival, they were fighting to simply be heard. The Rockabilly Rebel, Wanda Jackson. When people think of country's golden years, they often picture cowboys in hats or women in glittering gowns. But Wanda Jackson shattered that mold with a sound and an attitude that kicked the doors wide open. Known as the Queen of Rockabilly, Wanda straddled the line between country, rock, and everything rebellious in between. Her story begins in the 1950s when she toured with Elvis Presley. Elvis himself encouraged her to embrace rock and roll, and together they shaped an entirely new sound that would influence generations. Wanda's voice wasn't sweet or soft. It was fierce, growling, and playful. Songs like Let's Have a Party and Fujiyama Mama weren't just catchy, they were revolutionary. In an era when women were expected to sing about heartbreak quietly, Wanda was shouting about freedom and fun. But her rockabilly side sometimes overshadowed her country roots. Nashville didn't quite know what to do with her. Was she a country singer? A rock artist? An outsider? Wanda never cared about labels. She released country ballads alongside fiery rock anthems, building a fan base that didn't care about boundaries. Of course, that boldness came at a price. Rumors swirled about her personal life, her friendship with Elvis, and whether she could truly fit into Nashville's male-dominated industry. Yet through all of it, Wanda stood tall. She never toned herself down, never let the industry silence her, and as a result, she became one of the most influential women in music history, not just country. Today, she's still alive and recognized as a pioneer. Artists from Joan Jett to Adele have cited her influence. The fact that she's still here, still smiling, and still remembered as one of music's true rebels is nothing short of inspiring. Wanda Jackson didn't just survive the industry, she conquered it on her own terms. But while Wanda was tearing down barriers with rockabilly fire, another star was taking a very different route, becoming one of the longest-running cowboy balladeers in country history. The cowboy balladeer, Stonewall Jackson. Few names in country carry the old-school cowboy weight quite like Stonewall Jackson. From his very birth, his story sounded like it was meant for a song. Yes, he was literally named after the Confederate general, Stonewall Jackson. And from there, he lived a life that could only be described as pure country. His breakout came in 1959 with the song Waterloo. It wasn't just a hit, it was a statement. The song topped charts and introduced him as one of the most distinctive voices of his time. He wasn't chasing trends or trying to sound polished. His music had grit, storytelling, and a cowboy honesty that resonated with fans. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, Stonewall became a fixture at the Grand Ole Opry. He wasn't flashy, but he was reliable, and fans loved him for it. Songs like Don't Be Angry carried a mix of humor, heartbreak, and traditional country twang. Unlike other stars who bent to Nashville's commercial demands, Stonewall stayed true to himself. But that defiance also brought struggles. Rumors of disputes with Opry management surfaced, with whispers that he felt sidelined as newer acts took center stage. Still, he pushed on, performing well into later life. What makes Stonewall's survival special is that he never needed to reinvent himself. He stuck to his guns, literally and musically. Fans saw him as a living cowboy, not a manufactured star. And even after the charts moved on, his songs lived on through jukeboxes, radio, and Opry memories. Stonewall represents the country singer who never bent, never broke, and somehow managed to last decades in one of the toughest industries. But while his voice echoed through Opry halls, another man's sound was hidden behind the biggest stars in the world. The steel guitar master, Lloyd Green. Most fans know the singers, but few know the musicians who gave country music its soul. And in the case of the steel guitar, no one shaped its sound more than Lloyd Green. If you've ever listened to classic Nashville hits from the 1960s or 70s, chances are you've heard Lloyd, whether you realized it or not. His steel guitar playing became the defining background sound for artists like Charlie Pride, George Jones, Don Williams, and even Paul McCartney when he dabbled in country. What makes Lloyd's story fascinating is how much influence he had without ever being the face on the album cover. He recorded on over 500 albums, playing an estimated 20,000 sessions. Think about that. 20,000 times his sound was etched into country history. Yet most people never knew his name. But musicians knew. Within Nashville, Lloyd was considered a legend among legends. His technique on the steel guitar was unmatched, and he constantly pushed the instrument into new creative territory. Fans often say his playing could bring you to tears, even without lyrics. Despite his enormous contributions, Lloyd rarely stepped into the spotlight. Rumors suggest he preferred it that way, valuing the craft over the fame. That decision may have kept his name out of the headlines, but it cemented his role as one of country's quiet giants. Today, he remains alive as a reminder that country music isn't just about the singers, it's about the players behind them. Lloyd Green's survival is proof that even those working in the shadows can leave a lasting legacy. And speaking of legacies, there's one name still standing tall after decades, a man often called the last giant of country's golden age. When we look at these legends, Wanda Jackson breaking barriers, Stonewall Jackson holding firm to tradition, Lloyd Green shaping sounds from the shadows, and Leroy Van Dyke still standing tall, we see more than just names. We see survival. We see resilience. We see the story of country music itself, told through voices that refuse to be silenced. What's most shocking isn't just that they're still alive, it's what their lives represent. Country music wasn't built only on superstardom. It was built on rebels, outsiders, heartbreak survivors, and tireless workers who poured everything into their songs. Some became household names. Others, like Lloyd Green, stayed in the shadows. But together, they kept the heart of the country alive for decades. And now, it's your turn. Out of all the legends we've talked about today, which one surprised you the most? We eagerly want to hear from you.